Okay, welcome. It's I again in my Old Testament prophet persona. This will be the sixth prophecy. This is on madness. I'll have some links, I guess. So if you want to go to nobabies.net, you'll get this. Scroll on down. Here's how to get a hold of me. That's what you'll find. Some of these are good summaries and so forth. YouTube links will get you to all the YouTubes. First 32 are the important ones. They give you scientific truth, the best I can arrange. And then there's the scripts for all of them. And then there's about, what do we say? This is about Movie 51, Prophecy 6, on madness. They say, I don't know, I wasn't there, but they say Einstein said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, looking for a different result. If so, yeah, that's me. 30 years I've been trying to warn people that kinship is required for fertility, and responses have been cool to cold, total failure, 30 straight years, still trying. By that definition, you don't get any crazier than that. I'll define that, we kind of define it as self-destructive behavior. Illogical self-destructive behavior. Okay, ample reason to believe if you go through those first 32 scripts, a terminally outbred community will be selected by nature for elimination. Drugs, drug use, biologically unproductive socialization, shall we say, self-destructive behavior, anything like that would qualify. Might be nature getting rid of us because we're a threat. We're a threat because we're outbred, and so nature, not seeing the big picture, chooses each local population for extinction to protect the species, which doesn't happen if you get all the local ones. Okay, during the 1960s, U.S. was involved with a terrible war in Vietnam. There were protests, and I was quite in favor of the peace movement in those days. But it came with a package. If you were going to get into war protest, you kind of needed to be a hippie, otherwise you weren't, in the know. And the package included restrictions on speech at Berkeley. The students insisted that the government couldn't set up recruitment tables on campus so kids could sign up for the military. Yeah, that's going to be kind of borderline, but it's not borderline any longer. Squalor. Back in the old days, you had back in those days, the hippies were getting things that were different. They didn't have Latin names. The doctors would look at them and say, "There's no Latin name, no proper name for this," but it's obviously the grunge. Or there were Saxon names like the crud, and they were just total filth. That was in those days. And there was promiscuity, drug abuse. I resented all that because I was for peace, but the other things didn't appeal to me. So I was kind of sidelined. Censorship, of course, now is headline news if you read the right sources. There are thousands of homeless living on the streets of our great cities, and pretty much in the kind of squalor that the hippies did to themselves. Heterosexual promiscuity nowadays seems kind of quaint. Um, drugs, oh yeah, drugs continue to be popular. Um, right of free speech is so fundamental that attacking it harms even the person doing the attacking. Uh, so, um, so that's obviously madness. Squalor, if though the people who making it happen aren't the spoiled hippies, it's the super rich that have basically made it happen. They've arranged it so that those armies of desperate people on the streets um, are are there and are stuck there. Antibiotic resistant tuberculosis, going to get into that population if it's not already. Lots of the scariest diseases are spread by contact or mucus or poor sanitation. Tuberculosis, some of the TB cough spit on the ground, turns into dust, gets inhaled. So they will probably come when just breathing the air in any of those great western cities will uh, expose you to and very likely give you antibiotic resistant tuberculosis. Doesn't matter how rich or powerful you are or how assiduously uh, they twerk and pirouette over the dung and needles on the sidewalks. Sexual attitudes are fluid enough so that much sexual drive is not biologically productive, which may not be damaged to the individual, damaging to the individual. You make up your mind. I have nothing to offer. Certainly penalizes the population. Mind offering drugs. I have over here something published by Hillsdale College in Hillsdale, Michigan. They say that there's as much marijuana being used by young adults in the country now as at any time since 1970, and the THC ingredient that produces the high is at 10 times the level as it was in those days. Don't remind me that this is a controversial position. He mentions that more than once. Also says that marijuana can lead to schizophrenia, and the combination of schizophrenia and THC poisoning is very dangerous indeed with regard to violence. Unless you think you can doubt the man, but here's a reference to The Economist, which is, for some purposes, highly dependable. They are far as I can tell, it's the mouth organ for the super rich, the globalists. They're the cheering section for globalism. But when they report a fact, they're well paid to try to get things precise, accurate, not, as it were, right. They are under no compulsion to give you a balanced picture. In fact, they're under compulsion to give you an unbalanced uh, uh, picture, and they will say as much. Okay, so reefer madness was some term, I don't know, in the 50s or something. And yeah, it's back. Um, very young people don't seem to have the same rising use, and that seems good to me, but they're probably using something that's even more um, powerful. Um, Here's a study that says, well, there's a modest increase in suicides with marijuana, um, uh, but only among teenagers. I think it's fair to say that self-destructive behavior after marijuana use is not epidemic, probably not as bad as alcohol. Across the board, the suicide rate is a catastrophe. All right, let's go to scripture since in my Old Testament prophet garb here. As usual, I'll try to distinguish between the story and a backstory. These are these are things. It seems to me you don't have to believe it, but. Mm, and I tend to think the backstory is really cut out of the whole cloth, but there may be a story in there. And you don't let me dissuade from your ancestral belief, but you might think it over and see what I have to say is useful to you. All right. Story of Lot. Lot was a kinsman of Abraham. Both had enormous flocks. Um, um, and Lot moved his flocks from basically Iraq, Fertile Crescent, the southern Mesopotamia, to land near the Dead Sea. It's about 500 miles as the crow flies. It doesn't seem likely that Lot drove his sheep 500 miles across open desert. He'd have gone around north and then west and then south again. So it would be a 1,000-mile trip to keep the sheep alive. Yeah, okay. That's my backstory. Anyway, you cut it, the two must have had enormous flocks indeed. One moment here. All right, we mentioned Lot and Abraham probably had huge flocks, and that's plausible. Um, they were so big, before you moved 1,000 miles to get your flock away from somebody else's flock, you probably had more sheep than you could produce in a lifetime. Generation after generation of sheep, you still weren't going to be have that many. Um, so, uh, so the hint that there may be more than one person is Abraham, or it has more than one name. He's called Abram for a while, and then it's Abraham, and believe what you will. All right. Apparently, well, we know, and no Bible scholar has known before, where did it say this? I propose that between them they had cracked the puzzle of kinship / population size and fertility. They knew how that worked. That's the only way you could have these enormous flocks. And since nobody else knows it, this was of course incredibly useful to them. Even with that most precious of secrets, hard to believe that a flux, okay, in a single generation, no. Um, um, let's see, as events unfold, story of Lot follows one man for a few days. So we'll assume that there really is a story, because this is something that could have, most of it, been witnessed by this one identified man. So his story is the story. Anything he didn't see is suspect. All right, he went to the city of Sodom on the Dead Sea. Since mating and fertility were his whole life, he probably was managing the fertility of his shepherds as well. He had 2 daughters, so you suppose he may have been looking for sons-in-law. So as the curtain rises, Lot is at the city gate. And what's he doing there? Well, I think he was looking for babies. His whole life has been fertility. He's in a big city. It's as big as, his entire flock. And he's saying, where are their babies? And he's at the city gate because that's where the soldiers are, the safest place, and moves traffic. And when he's there, um, two angels show up. Well, an angel's messenger, and given the amount of executive work managing that empire of sheep, uh, Lot would not have been surprised to have a couple of messengers come up to tell him what was going on and get instructions. Uh, Lot greeted them very courteously, by his own report. Uh, um, well, so the angels, the young men, the messengers, the shepherds, whatever they were, went to Lot's house at his invitation, and a crowd gathered and screamed, "Send him out here so we can have sex with them." Um, when I was younger, I regarded this scene as entirely implausible. Now, in an era of increasing gender fluidity, my sense is we're just a nose hair away from getting to that kind of scene. Mobs screaming for the sexual access to um, uh, people that would not biologically be productive to have sex with. Um, so Lot went out and he said, "Well, I'll just give you my daughters, but don't challenge my guests. Rules of hospitality. Sorry, I can be hospitable, but if a mob is outside and they're acting in a disorderly fashion, and I have a couple of daughters, I'll call 911, of course. And if that's not possible, before I let them have my daughters, I will let them have whatever I've got in the way of the work of a weapon." But the Lot story was he didn't threaten them. Um, Now then, so Lot goes out and scolds them, and they um, they're mobbing him, and the angels reach out and pull Lot into the house, shut the door. All sounds very plausible. At least this is still Lot recounting the story, so we have one witness. Um, our angels are now referred to as men, pure and simple. And then these two smote the men with the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. Lot can't see that. He's been pushed inside. The two young men have gone outside and they're mopping up the landscape with this crowd. Yeah, I can imagine from time to time someone would scream my eye when he got a rock in it, because these shepherds, a shepherd will have a crook. Not like this one. You'd get a straight branch and a one coming off the side, and so it would be at an angle, and sharpen that end and this corner, and you got a weapon as well as a tool. And a lot less effort than went into soaking and heating and bending this. And then a sling. Well, yes, have a flock sheep. One wanders away, hit him with a rock, he rejoins the flock. A dog will do that for you, but if you got nothing else to do and don't want to spend what it would take to feed a dog, just having a sling and a bunch of rocks, and you just spend the day practicing with the sling till you're really good. And so the young men say to Lot, "Get out." And so Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law. Now we are told his daughters are married, and says, "Get up and we're gonna get out of here. And they laughed at him. Giggled. Anyway, um, that sounds like backstory because um, suddenly it skips to the next morning. There's no reason to have a break in the continuity of the story. Um, so somebody stuck this bit in, I think, um, to explain what happened to the girls' husbands. Um, so the young men, the angels, dragged them out, and they said, "Don't look back. Uh, escape to the mountains, lest thou be consumed." All right, maybe. Backstory. I don't know. And Lot says, "Oh, don't make me go to the mountains. Let me go there's a small city near here. It's just a little city. Let me go there." Well, it's smaller than Sodom, obviously, and he's obviously onto the fact that size of the population matters. He is not onto the fact that the size past a certain point doesn't matter. It's just how many generations the population's been that big. He hasn't got that. He doesn't have a computer that will tell him that. Um, uh, so, um, uh, um, but he sensed this population had something to do with it. But that's the kind of thing that makes it seem plausible, because Lot is acting as if he knows something he could not possibly know, that I did not know until I'd done enough work with the computer program and worked around with it, looking at other scientists. Okay, so they spared Zoar, um, and it says, "Oh, they entered Zoar first thing in the morning." Um, oh well, the sun was risen upon the earth. So, this is the kind of thing Lot would have known. And when he retold this story to his grandchildren, I imagine he told them that kind of detail. Um, And then the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from heaven, and he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities which grew upon that ground. And who saw it? Well, um, Lot and his family was looking the other direction. His wife turned back uh, and got turned into a pillar of salt. Well, along this beyond near the Dead Sea, there are rock salt cliffs, and sometimes those will erode and look like you got a person standing there. So that's backstory, turning into a pillar of salt. It was done because people knew those pillars were around and said, "Oh, that's what caused that." They added it to make the thing convincing, but for a lot of us, it's not convincing. Okay, here's the fire of heaven coming down. That looks like about a mile high to me. And that's quite plausible given the size of the town and the size of the fire. And here's Mrs. Lot looking back, about to be turned into salt. These angels have wings. You think that would have provoked some comment. Don't worry about it. They're making their way. Um, so Abraham, don't know which Abraham, got up early in the morning. You can see the smoke coming up like from a furnace. Sounds like the same fellow writing backstory, but you're not going to see that mile-high thing from 500 miles away. The Earth does curve. So that added bit of detail. Oh, so Abraham witnessed it, but he couldn't have. All right. And then the girls, found out that Zohar is just like Sodom was. Um, so uh, they talk him into leaving the the city of Zoar, just as they left Sodom, because the girls said they couldn't find anybody who'd marry them and have sex with them. Um, all right. Um, that's the way you'd expect it. Even though the city's much smaller, the timing is about the same because both of them are, populations in the thousands, and that is what we know. But nobody prior to this century, well, maybe late last century, has known that. So the girls say, okay, we couldn't find anybody to make us pregnant in Sodom. We couldn't find anybody in Zoar, and we need to get pregnant. So they got Lot drunk and went in and had their way with him. And uh, I'm sure I'm sure they either told him or he figured it out. Anyway, they had a couple of sons, and uh, one's name gave his name to the people called the Moabites. You remember the Moabites? Yeah, Ruth. There's a book of Ruth, the story of Ruth. Ruth was a Moabite. Ammon, um, uh, Mr. Ben-Ami gave his name to the Ammonites. All right, fine. That Lot didn't see that happen, but the people after the fact would have known that those nations existed. Um, so the incest worked out pretty well. Well, we're left with one burning question, no pun intended. If we exclude a supernatural cause of the destruction of Sodom, what actually did happen? Um, People would have hardly failed to notice when several cities just suddenly disappear and all you have is a burned out wreck. I don't know, but maybe the two shepherds, messengers, angels, went back and wiped out the city with just the two of them. That would take a long, hard time. Um, I have an nagging suspicion that the society of Sodom was on the edge of disintegrating. That that they were teetering on the brink of really big self-destructive behavior, and the introduction of these two strangers was just enough to push them over the edge. Uh, the people of the town burned the town over their heads. Just a thought, can't prove it, but I'm told about places like that. I've never lived in a place like Sodom or any of the great West Coast cities where uh, they're a little less traditional than we are in this part of the world. Uh, I have to think, well, it didn't work out so well last time they did that, is it? Okay, the other story is a totally different approach. This time, the backstory is more important than the story itself. You've probably heard of Samson and Delilah, and this is a previous adventure of Samson's, and then he gets betrayed by Delilah, and it's hard to believe that that he was really stupid enough for him time and again to tell her, "Oh, do this and I'll be helpless," and she does it. And then he finally tells her the truth. I don't know, maybe she had a way with men. Anyway, he was Nazarite, meant his hair couldn't be cut. Um, and he tells her that, and sure, she cuts his hair, and they come and capture him because he becomes weak as a kitten after his hair's been cut. Okay, and they put him to work grinding grain, and so we got to work out anyway, and his hair grew back. Ooh, and they're going to have a sacrifice to their god Dagon, and probably going to sacrifice Samson, you know. When the people saw him, they all cheered. Um, and so they're all happy and drunk, and they call for Samson to make sport of him. Um, and they sit in between two pillars. All right. They took Samson to the temple, plausible, but they set him between the pillars. Now, I've never seen a building where there were two major structural elements right next to each other. I've never seen it. And it'd be easy enough to make it happen, but when they excavate something like that, I'm sure there will be a great amount of excitement. Oh, here, this must have been the kind of temple that they had at the time. Uh, Even if that existed, Samson could not know. He says, as holy Nazarite, as well as being a judge of Israel, he would not have gone into a temple to Dagon. He wouldn't know the pillars were there. All right, so far we have some backstory and then a very little bit of story. So there's a boy leading Samson around. He says, let me feel the pillars and so I can lean on them. He's asking a favor from a boy he's about to kill. I suppose we're supposed to be so much in sympathy with Samson that the boy means no more to us than to him. But nobody's going to survive, so it's all backstory. And so Samson lays hold of the pillars, gives it a heave. All right, nice piece of artwork there. You can see the implication that the thing's just towering monument. And if they're building everything as tall and skinny, yeah, maybe. All right, the artist did his job. So he pulls down the temple, brought the house down, didn't he? No witnesses, it's all backstory. It all had to be concocted to account for what they did know. And what did they know? Let's see where. Where's that picture? Alrighty. I don't know. Somehow or other I erased the picture. All right. Story. Strong man named Samson got captured. All right. Was taken to a temple that fell over and killed him and a bunch of other people. Well, of course, buildings fall over. You put up a big building. It's to pump the ego of some powerful person and show off his wealth and influence. And there's glory in it. There's no glory in maintaining it, so they frequently don't get maintained. Our own Supreme Court building, the front fell off of it a few years back. Hadn't been maintained properly. Wasn't built by the best available labor, I'm pretty sure. All right, if we buy into the backstory, there's nothing odd about Samson's action. He's captured, blind, and used as a toy. Very likely he's about to be killed. He might be willing to kill himself along with his tormentors without being particularly self-destructive. If you suspect that gender fluidity nudges a person towards self-destruction, forget it in this case. At least in backstory, Samson has a sweet tooth for the ladies. All right. Yet the story is not unrelated to self-destruction. if you go to this link here, um, Wikipedia, Samson option. Everybody, pretty much, I think everybody understands that Israel has nuclear weapons. Since nuclear war itself is unthinkable, the two obvious uses they might serve would be deterrence, act me and I'll blow you to smithereens, or attack me and I'll blow the whole world to smithereens. These two require one thing: proof that the weapon is in hand. People have to know it. Feeling that first priority must be to convince the people without proof. But for decades, Israel has refused to acknowledge nuclear weapons. All hints get dropped, as you'll learn if you read that article. There was a movie, Dr. Strangelove, in which the Russians had built a doomsday device, but they'd kept it secret. They said they were planning to let people know. And Dr. Strangelove says the whole point of a doomsday device is people have to know about it. But Israel has officially kept this in the dark. Okay, so neither second strike nor blow up the whole world, neither of those options seem to be the purpose of the Israeli nuclear force. What's left is called the Samson option, means that it must be a combination of slaughter and suicide. Israel has, I'm given to believe, 5 submarines capable of launching nuclear missiles. If they wanted to blow themselves up, this would be very inefficient. They just have to sit on the thing. Okay, and then those subs can attack any big population center in the world. All right. Many years ago, I knew a man who presented himself as Jewish. I never had a moment's reason to doubt that. He told me that Israel at the time had a nuclear bomb, I think it was the 1980s, I guess, hidden in every American city. That to me at the time seemed so preposterous, I didn't even bother to ask him to clarify it. Wish I had. Well, maybe I'm glad I didn't, because maybe I would have been thought a threat. So I don't have privileged information. I have heard a rumor, and that is that those bombs are or were there. And I suspect the thought was that if Israel was overrun, she'd strike America for having let her down. Okay, that actually seems to have been reported. According to that Wikipedia article, in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, Arab forces were overwhelming Israel. Prime Minister Golda Meir authorized a nuclear alert, 13 A-bombs to be readied for use by missiles and aircraft, and the Israeli ambassador warned President Nixon of very serious conclusions if the United States didn't airlift in supplies. Nixon airlifted the supplies. Smells like nuclear blackmail, but even that would require people knowing you had the weapons. Not really Samson's strategy. That would involve slaughter and suicide. One thing that might make sense in this regard, well, not good sense, but at least it would account for having the weapons and keeping them secret. And that is that the nuclear attack would be against the Jewish populations in the U.S. if Israel were being overwhelmed. On the same principle, you let us down. You didn't let America support Israel enough, and you'll be punished. And that gives you the suicide, as well as the slaughter, as well as the logic of, we're not going to tell you that they're there. This is a veiled threat, not a clear threat. And that, I think, is absolutely insane, if it's true. And so, yeah, self-destructive behavior, we do see it around ourselves. Okay, Well, that will do it. You have a good one. As they say, like, share, subscribe, and press the notification bell. You do that on YouTube. I just can't help saying it because everybody else does. And y'all be have a nice day.